Let's get started, guys. So why don't we just go around the room and introduce ourselves? So Ryan, could you just go and introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Ryan Denning. I'm the VP of Sales for Blackpoint Cyber.
All right, great. And I see Danny's out there. Danny, why don't you go ahead and do the same thing, sir?
How's it going? It's Danny Jenkins here. I'm the CEO of ThreatLocker.
Okay, and we've got Rob today as well. Hey, Rob, welcome.
How's it going, Bruce?
Good, sir. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir.
Rob Ray, Senior Vice President of Business Development with Datto.
All right, awesome. So we're going to just get started and dig in here and start talking about what we need to have in your cybersecurity stack for 2021 and beyond. And before we get too far along, I guess, Danny, I'll start with you. What do you think the most important thing is when you're protecting an endpoint? Now that we've got endpoints running wild out there, what's the most important thing?
Well, the real thing is that hasn't changed, but I guess it's just got more serious. If you go back 10 years ago, everyone was it didn't really matter if you got malware. Today, it does matter if you get malware because it destroys your business. So from my point of view, obviously, it's not relying on your antivirus. It's implementing more zero trust, denying by default, using, and of course, I'm going to say this because I'm the CEO of ThreatLocker, but I'm the CEO. ThreatLocker's here for that exact reason. We understand that protecting an endpoint, it requires more than someone detecting threats at the other end and hoping we detect malware. You've got to add that zero trust. You've got to add that default deny approach, and you've got to control not just what can run, but what it can do once it's running on your endpoints.
I know that you spoke earlier today, but can you just for a second explain to us what zero trust is? I mean, just for a second, just because I want to make sure everybody's on the same page with that.
Okay, so what zero trust is not what it's marketed as. So the true concept of zero trust is we assume everything's bad and we go from there, as opposed to assuming everything's good, which is what unfortunately we do far too often. Then we try and detect the bad. Zero trust means I trust nothing, and then I permit only as required to perform the function. And whether that's at a human level where I say you don't have permission to this file because you don't need it, or whether it's at an endpoint level where we say this software isn't going to be allowed to run because it's not on the permit list, it's not on the whitelist. So that's the true meaning out of it. Unfortunately, it's one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around in the marketing community. We have a zero trust antivirus. We don't trust any viruses. That's not what zero trust means.
So, all right, Rob, how would I explain that? I mean, you're the guy that helps us kind of explain stuff to folks out there. How would you explain that to, I don't know, a CEO or something like this?
So this is where you say something really smart, and then I have to kind of dumb it down so that I understand it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's perfect. It's hilarious because like what Danny mentioned, I just had a conversation with my CISO yesterday, and he said exactly the same thing, that zero trust is being marketed in totally the wrong way. And there's a lack of understanding of what that means. And you got to remember that the average user that you're talking to is not sophisticated when it comes to IT. Forget about security. So you do need to figure out a couple of different ways. You need to figure out a couple of different ways of being able to take something this complicated and dumb it down for them to the point where they can understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what it is that they're actually buying. Excuse me. And I'm sure you've heard this. I've heard this numerous times where a lot of guys users think that something as simple as antivirus will just cut it. And then, and then all of a sudden it's like, so there is a lot more to the conversation. And that's one of the things that you really need to have. I don't know about, and I'll actually throw the question back at you guys, but what I understand is that zero trust is like almost an unachievable state. Like it's kind of like the ideal state, but practically impossible to get to.
So what do you think about that, Danny?
So, and I guess there's different levels. I mean, true zero trust is let's just dig a hole and throw the computer in the concrete and then nothing can happen. But in terms of the endpoint protection, where we think about it is zero trust is about you need to run certain applications on your computer and you don't need to, my phone's flashing at me in silent, but you don't need to run anything else on your computer. So you deny that everything by default, and then when you need an application, you permit it. But it really isn't unachievable in that sense, in that, well, MSPs do it all over the world. I mean, we've got clients who have deployed thousands of seats and adopted this default deny approach. And I like to use the word default deny because it takes away the marketing blur. It's like, it's not on the list, it can't run. And then if it is on the list, it can do only what it needs to do. And it really isn't complicated from that point of view. And the challenge is when you think about it across the board and you start thinking about permissions from an MSP perspective, because it's not just about what can run on your endpoint, it's about what files you have access to. MSPs don't want to get involved on their clients. Well, who needs access to this file? They just say, oh, I'm going to open up everything. So that part's a little bit more challenging. It's not less important. And from an enterprise world, it's probably just as important. But it is important that people understand that you can achieve it, and you can achieve elements of it by denying by default and just using tools like ThreatLocker to make it easier.
Okay, great. So then let's come back to you, Ryan. I guess we're not back to you. Let's go to you, sir. And just a real quick question here. What do you think the most important part of, your endpoint and protecting it is?
Well, I definitely agree with Danny and what he was saying about the endpoints. In addition to that, I would say visibility becomes really important. Specifically, being able to see what processes are running on that endpoint, the child processes, so on and so forth. So having really good visibility into that, and then also having visibility into the environment around that endpoint too. Being able to see where that endpoint is and what's around it, that visibility is really what the attacker's looking for as well.
All right, great. So kind of moving along here, let's say that I'm going to go with the zero trust model that Danny described. How does that complement your model, Ryan? Like, how do these two work together?
They work. I mean, I'm a big fan of ThreatLocker. They complement each other because we have visibility into the endpoint, which the hacker will get initial access on that system. And if you think about how the attacker progresses through a breach, from initial access to enumeration and reconnaissance activity, and then ultimately a lateral spread. We can see the visibility when the attacker lands on that endpoint and he's just kind of sitting there watching, gathering that data and information. And Danny's there telling them what they can run and what they can't run. With that kind of technology working together there, having that, attacker visibility from the kind of fileless and, enumeration reconnaissance phase to when they actually start to try and leverage the technologies against you, which is what they're doing, fileless malware attacks using PowerShell, using WMI in ways that it wasn't meant to be, but manipulating those normal trusted applications against you, where Danny can say, hey, PowerShell shouldn't be doing that. And no, I'm not going to allow you to do that. So it's kind of like a 1-2 punch, really.
All right, so let's say that I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to be deploying these tools. And I decide that I'm going to go with ThreatLocker, Danny, or maybe I'm going to get started. What are some of the mistakes that you see when it comes to the endpoint and using your tools to protect it?
Well, and I think this is probably a global mistake. I mean, the two biggest risks for ThreatLocker clients is one is not deploying it on enough endpoints. And sometimes it's very easy to get 90% and then you miss the 10%. So making sure you have it, and then you have policies to ensure that if you don't have it, things don't work like they shouldn't be. That you can't access things that are important to you. The other mistake we see is people running in monitor mode. And unfortunately, we had a case. We had a very large car dealer, had ThreatLocker deployed across the entire organization, had 12 computers that were in a monitoring only state because the CEO, the C-suite in the company didn't want to be controlled. And someone got onto their machine. They got onto one of the C-suite machines. They were also domain admins, which is just absolutely crazy. And they just pushed out malware. Now, great, the 290 something endpoints were locked down. 298 endpoints didn't get malware. But guess what? The C-suite, which had access to all the data, did get ransomware. and they also had access to group policy and everything. So it's absolutely imperative that when you deploy security, you deploy it completely and you don't do it half-assed.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah, I think that's
For sure.
we should have that on our report of what level of ass you are.
All right, so Rob, coming your direction, sir. Let's I guess we'll ask you. I mean, from backup land, and I mean, Datto has such a stack of different tools available when it comes to helping secure the data. What do you see like people mess up on? Like, where do people go wrong when it comes to doing this right? Where do they go half-assed?
2FA, open and remaining open RDP sessions. Like, it's unbelievable. A lot of the stuff, there's an expression that we use. It's that the cobbler's kids have the worst shoes, something along those lines. And when you take a look at what MSPs are doing, like they're so busy protecting their actual clients that they're not taking time to protect themselves. And we've all seen it, right? We've all seen where Homeland Security, and even pre-COVID, a lot of my conversations, a lot of the keynote presentations I was giving was specifically about this, where MSPs are under attack. Because what's happening is the same thing that all of us vendors recognize is that one MSP leads you to many end users. The bad guys know the same thing. So why go and attack 100, 200 small business owners rather than just attack one MSP and get access to them? So we saw this, right? We saw where the hackers were getting in. They would get in, say, to something like your documentation tool. Now they have the keys to the kingdom completely when they're in there. And first thing they do is they go and delete the backups because they don't want you to be able to recover any of this stuff. And then what they do is basically distribute ransomware. And it's game over for you as an MSP when you're the one that is responsible when they're paying you to protect them, but you're the one where you're the source of the actual issue. We had an incident last year. It was literally about 12 months ago, where this one MSP, fairly large shop out of Chicago, actually had a pretty serious security plan, right? And they were talking to their clients about it and everything like that. They put 2FA everywhere with the exception of the admin login because it was too complicated and too many people had access to it. So they just left that off. Guess what the hackers are going for? That's the first thing they're going for, right? So they got in there, deleted all the backups. Now, there's a couple things that we've done. First of all, 2FA is mandatory on all of our RMM products now. And funny enough, when you turn to our community and say, we're going to mandate everybody has to go in this direction, not one complaint, which is awesome. So everybody recognized the importance of it. That was the first part. The second part, what we did was when somebody goes in and deletes an entire cloud backup set, that amount of data, we actually put it into, let's call it like a recycle bin, instead of it being actually deleted. So the data will sit there. It's not racking up costs by sitting there, but it's at least off to the side now and not accessible from inside the actual MSP. It sits in this recycle bin. So what that does is if the bad guys do get in, the bad guys do delete all the backups, we still have the data and we still have the ability to bring that data back. And we actually instituted that before all these attacks happened. And fortunately, we were able to recover that one MSP in Chicago, for example. We were able to go and recover it and then realize, this is probably a real deal and something that we institute for everybody. And that's exactly what we did. So just silly little mistakes. You should be putting yourself through the same security pen testing that you want to put your clients through.
All right, perfect, Rob. Thank you. And how about in your end, Ryan? Where do people screw it up when it comes to your product?
So it can be boiled down to partial deployments, right? So they think, well, we'll protect the servers. We won't worry about the endpoints. We can save a little bit of money that way, maybe. And what you're really doing is you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because I guarantee you Murphy's Law kicks in and the attacker is going to land on one of those endpoints. He's going to spread around there. And so what you're doing is you're making us hunt and protect you with a hand tied behind our back. So the biggest problem with that would be deployment and not putting it on everything. You wouldn't build a wall and leave, bricks out of it, and leave a hole in your defenses. And so by not deploying it fully and just doing partial deployments, there's a saying, right? Like sometimes, you could get lucky, and we've been lucky actually stopping ransomware attacks not being fully deployed. And it's really one of those things, like it's complete luck. And I'll take it, right? I'll take saving people any day, luck. But, it'd be much better if it was measured and done correctly and you didn't have to rely on that luck piece. So I'd say full deployment, that gives us the full picture in the SOC. And because we're hunting this stuff down in real time, we're not having to aggregate data. We can react very quickly to this, and have been very successful stopping those kind of attacks when we're fully deployed.
All right. So coming back to you, Danny, let's say I deploy your product and I have everything set up with your product and everything's whitelisted properly and I got it out of monitor mode. Do I still need antivirus on my endpoints?
So I've got into trouble a few times about some of our controversial videos about how much I love antivirus. I mean, look, there's no secret that I do not like antivirus. But here's the thing, and it comes down to similar to the question you asked about Ryan too. We are not a detection. We don't look for threats. So Ryan's out there and Ryan's looking for hackers and he's looking for bad guys and his team's doing a great job at that. And it kind of like an antivirus is doing the same at just a SOC level. It doesn't do anything. But we're never going to tell you. We're not here to say this is good, this is bad. We're here to say, do you want this in your business? You're the MSP. You decide. You're the responsible party here. Do you want this or not? So the antivirus is not something that we'd recommend you take away. I mean, yes, we have people downgrade to cheaper antiviruses, remove some of the EDR components, but because they want to save a few dollars. Ultimately, I think antivirus sucks anyway. But getting rid of it is kind of like, it's one of those necessary evils that you just have, and it's there. And it's kind of like, maybe one day it's going to, one of your tech guys is going to be drinking on a Friday night. I mean, it's nearly 5 o'clock here in Florida. The wine's going to come out. Somebody's going to request permission to something. I'm going to permit it. And I shouldn't have done that, but I felt nice today. And that's where the antivirus might save your bacon. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, the preference is we deny everything. We don't allow anything. But the antivirus is almost like a backup to that. And it's kind of like the backup software. We back up our systems. We have RAID. We have we have good software, but we still run a backup because sometimes something's going to go wrong, and the antivirus serves as a nice backup to that.
All right, great. So what about you, Ryan? I decide that I'm doing Blackpoint. I got your guys watching for threats. Do I actually need to have an antivirus out there?
So I'm with Danny on that one. It's a necessary evil. Basically, just pick the one you hate the least and go with that. It is necessary. They're going to catch the well-known stuff, and frankly, EDR is AV with better marketing. So you can totally downgrade and, go with the lower cost. And that's a great idea if you're trying to save some money, but you do need one. And as you pick one that you like the best, that has the best plan and works, for your company the best. Put it in there. That layer is important to have, but you can't rely on that to stop this stuff. You gotta kind of assume, okay, this is a well-known threat, and it's out there, and this user is going to click it, and everyone knows about this one. It might block it, and that's going to help you.
All right, good deal. And then Rob, well, I'm investing in all sorts of different things. I have cloud backups and all sorts of stuff. Do I could I get rid of something like antivirus if I have good backups?
Sure, why not? Absolutely, you could. No, of course not. Absolutely not. It's funny because backup tends to, it's technically part of the security stack, but it's not really. Like when I talk to Ryan and Danny, I'm like the goofy kid that wants to be in the cool kid party, and they're like, no, you're not a security vendor. You're just a storage vendor. It's so we like to call ourselves in the security space, but really we're data protection. But it's the last line of defense when everything else has gone wrong. And what are you going to do? Like, it is the last line of defense, and that's why data protection. That's why data. That's why all of our competitors, we're all still growing phenomenally well. And really, I like to think that our product is kind of the cornerstone of every managed service offering. And then you start layering on top of that and getting proactive with it. And you look at the technologies, like look at Blackpoint and ThreatLocker as an example. You guys haven't been around that long, but unbelievable amount of success and unbelievable amount of now MSPs using your products as a result of the entire scope has changed. And that's where, making sure that you're always evolving your stack, making sure that you're always looking for what's new. That's what the end users are paying you for, is to go and find stuff that is going to make them better than the next person, like safer than the next person, those kinds of things. But at the core of this, I mean, obviously I want to say that backup's the cornerstone of everything. And you should be testing your backups on a regular basis. You should be making sure that every single day, every single minute, whatever it is that you've got set up is being backed up, and it is there. And it's, most importantly, it's not even about the backup. Anybody can take a backup. It's about the recovery. That's the key. Make sure you can recover. That's what I would suggest.
All right, so let's switch gears here and let's focus on these users that are working at home. Danny, tell me the tools that you think should just be in place on every single computer out there. I'll let you run with that one for a second. Obviously, we need backups according to Rob, but what else goes into it?
So whenever you have, and we're talking about endpoints in the wild here, because we're not talking about firewalls protecting premises anymore. We're talking about endpoints in the wild, and they were always in the wild. Now there's just more of them in the wild. So at the very cornerstone, we need to protect every layer of threat. We need to have firewalls on the endpoints, whether it's a Windows firewall, an antivirus firewall, or the new ThreatLocker firewall that's being released next year, where you protect the endpoint from any inbound network traffic, because you don't want people connecting to your endpoint. You need to have technologies like application whitelisting. You need to be denying by default at every single endpoint. You shouldn't, if someone's sitting at home, you shouldn't be able to download whatever Chrome extensions or any plugins or any software they want. And you don't have to be an admin to download software. That's false. You don't have to be an admin to run ransomware. So you should have those controls in place, the application whitelisting. You need some kind of MDR, threat hunting, making sure these endpoints are doing what they should, aren't being used to access your network. And it scares me to death. I mean, I'm a security nut, and I'm one step from tinfoil on my head. But it genuinely scares me. I go to bed at night and we have dual factor, we have MDR and everything, we have application whitelisting, we have antivirus, everything's locked down. And I still unplug my computer from the network when I start off in the evening. I can't sleep without it because I'm so paranoid about these things. But so you need your MDR, you need your antivirus, just so we can feel good that we got an antivirus and those things. And you need your backup, especially if you have data on your endpoints. And really, I encourage that you shouldn't have data on your endpoints. But if you do have data on your endpoints, and yes, Rob, it's not. You're right. I don't consider it security backup, but I do consider it a necessary IT product, and it's an absolutely fundamental product of an MSP. And holy crap, I make our CTO, he does partial restores every single day of the week of ThreatLocker, and he does complete system restores every single week, because to me that's the cornerstone of our business. And I'm not thinking about cyber breaches, although I completely lose sleep over that. But if our systems die, if our RAID sets died, if our SANs die, and we process 300 million rows of data an hour, I mean, my heartburn is terrible on this. You got to have a system to recover from that. And we're talking about the endpoint. If you've got data on the endpoint, you should have a backup agent on the endpoint as well.
All right, great. So Ryan, well, actually, before I jump over to you, Ryan, just one thing I want to add here. Danny mentioned that you have to have antivirus, and I've been kind of kidding around about getting rid of it. One thing you should look at is you should look at your agreements and see what you've defined out inside of your agreements, because most of the MSP agreements we look at actually say that you have antivirus. And if you're just running like Microsoft's antivirus, they may not recognize that as the same kind of situation as actually running a third-party antivirus. So just make sure that you don't have that defined in your your contract. So coming over to you, Ryan, let's say that we're trying to protect our endpoints here. What would you add to Danny's stack, sir?
Oh man. He kind of hit the endpoint perfectly. I would maybe add DNS to that list. It's low hanging fruit. DNS protection, it can help. It's not very expensive to add to your stack. And then I would say, obviously, you got to have the 2FA, and backups absolutely part of this. I mean, you've got to have them. If something happens, if that endpoint gets, ransomed, or the servers, obviously, but, you've got to have a backup plan in place. And, really and truly, if you're in a security scenario where your endpoints have been encrypted, you're in a disaster recovery mode at that point. So, having that plan in place is going to help you with the security breach as well, because you're really going to your disaster recovery plan at that point. So yeah, and obviously the application whitelisting, you've got to, it's a no-brainer, right? Especially on servers and things like that. Just what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's going to help you immensely.
All right. So Rob, coming your way. So I got all these users. They're not working at the office anymore. Usually they're not the smartest users, right? They're the ones that are barely getting by when it was working at the office. Not like, people are used to traveling. These are now people that, are used to just sitting in the office and barely can get the printer to work. How do I make sure that their endpoints are backed up? We just talked about all this stuff, but I don't have as good of connections out there, and I might not have as good a control. How does Datto help us with that?
It's just something you got to schedule. It's something you got to manage. It's just something you've got to do. And one of the things when COVID hit, oh, by the way, did you hear that both of them said I was super important? That means I'm allowed to come to their security party. I think you heard that, right?
I do. I did. I'm amazed right now.
Good. I don't want to come to their stupid party anymore anyway. I'm going to go have my own over here. When COVID hit, actually, one of the things that we actually saw was because, of course, from a data protection standpoint, we try to protect data regardless of where it lives. Okay, so we got a number of different solutions for a number of different things, and one of the things is obviously the hybrid, which is the local backup as well as the cloud piece. And those tend to be, there's an appliance involved and there's heavy data sets, and those things pretty much when COVID hit, all pretty much got put on hold, because these larger projects are generally in an office somewhere, those kinds of things, and instead everybody's running home. Where we're fortunate is that everybody started buying Office 365 backup, which was amazing because it supplemented everything else. And then of course RMM along with it, because now you got to monitor all these extra endpoints. So all of a sudden you have all these office sites that you're protecting, but now you've got these at-home sites that you got to protect. And then the confusion starts, right? Because that's around the same time when everybody was saying, well, if your kids are using TikTok in on the same access point that you're accessing work stuff, China's got your information. You remember that kind of stuff, right? So it's just even education. Forget about product sales. Just education on what this all means and how to do it safely. We're about to release in a couple of weeks. We're going to release our ransomware report. We've been doing this report now for about 5-6 years. It's pretty comprehensive, and talks about what MSPs are seeing out there. But cumulatively, from around the world, all these MSPs give us this data. We crunch it all together and then show where the averages are. And one of the things that you're going to see when it comes out is first thing that they saw was there was a dramatic decrease of ransomware attacks and malware attacks the first couple weeks when the pandemic hit and everybody started going into lockdown. And that is literally because the black hats all had to find a work from home situation as well. It's funny when you kind of put that human element attached to it, that these are people that are dealing with the same pandemic, regardless of where they are, that we're dealing with, to the point where they had to stop hacking for a couple of weeks. And then what we saw was a significant increase. And my numbers aren't as aggressive, but one of the numbers I saw, I think it was ID Agent mentioned, 300%. I don't think it's quite that high, but there's definitely significant more. So two things, okay? Two things that I think we need to keep an eye out for is, number one, be out there educating your clients, make sure they understand what's going on, what's needed, what's necessary, and why you're doing all these things. And then like just so that education is absolutely key. And then the other aspect of it is just making sure that they actually have those protections and that they actually do have these products set up and going and understand why they're actually paying for them.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring this back to you again, Rob, because one of the things that I like about having Rob on the panel is he's able to kind of dumb things down for, well, the CEOs and stuff out there that we're communicating with. So, Rob, I mean, we are going to these different folks and we're trying to explain to them that it's going to cost more to work from home. Like, how do you do that? I mean, how do you explain that it's more expensive?
Well, I mean, these are in essence extra sites. It's not as if the office sites have stopped, you know. It's not as if those servers aren't still up and going. I think everybody kind of understands that is it's a necessary evil. A lot of the objections, or not objections, but a lot of the questions that we got back when this all started was, you know, can you help me reduce my bill? Can you figure out how to save me a few bucks? Or I'm not sure what the economy is going to look like. I'm not sure if we're going to hit into a recession. You know, there's all those types of things. I think there's a couple things that we can kind of stand proud on is IT is in essence what saved a lot of these small businesses. MSPs, in my mind, they got tagged with the essential service. And I think that was rightfully so. There's I'm going to suggest hundreds of thousands of jobs that were saved because of a managed service provider, because they were able to get somebody that's working from an office into a home environment. So when you start having these conversations with your end users to say, like, look, like this is what, like they turned around on a dime and were able to get this done. There are so many end users that credit their MSP with the reason why they're still in business and able to do business. So I think there's enough of that goodness. The only issue then comes as to whether somebody can afford to pay you or not, you know, because then there's like, is it economic downturn? Are you in a space that's being really impacted by COVID? So, you know, there's a lot of things there. One of the things I will suggest, and it's a piece of advice that we've been giving out, is if somebody does come to you and say they want to reduce the cost of their IT, make sure you reduce the service that you're delivering. Don't perform the same service and amount of services that you're delivering today at a lower price, because that just means that you were charging too much before. They need to feel the pain. And I'll give you an example. This literally happened to me, because when COVID hit, for some reason, proactively, a lot of companies reached out to people and said, do you want, or we can reduce your bill if you need it. Okay. I appreciate the effort, but why would you proactively offer discounting to your services, right? Wait for people, like, say, hey, you need help, call me and we'll talk it through, which is exactly what we did. And we helped, I think, 100% of the people that called us and asked for help. But I didn't proactively set up a fund and go out and give it away, you know. So my cable company, my Wi-Fi provider, comes in and says, hey, you know, if you guys want a discount, let us know. If you guys are struggling through this. Of course, my wife, she's cheap, so she's totally going to take advantage of this. And she literally says to the cable company, I want to reduce my bill. Cable company says, no problem. We're going to reduce the pipe coming into your house. And then like it happens on a dime to save like $20 a month. And all of a sudden I get kicked off my Zoom call and the kids are kicked off the school. And then all of a sudden everybody's freaking out on our group chat, our family group chat. So she calls them back, and not only did we get the service back, but she actually upgraded to the next level because we're knowing that we're all going to be home on Zoom. So now I'm paying double what I was before, when the whole idea was I wanted to reduce it. So again, like the whole message there is, if you're going to reduce your cost, reduce the service, so they feel a little bit of pain as to what they were paying for before. And it still shocks me to this day, and I think I saw it again today, where lawyers that charge $350 an hour aren't willing to pay you 100, 150 to do your services. Like, I don't understand that.
I'm not going to comment on that. We'll probably have to come back to you to get more in get more in the weeds with that one for a second. But all right, so let's talk about saving money. Danny, when I was running my MSP, I would run into this situation where, well, the CEO, I mean, they want to save money by not putting the same stack on every computer. So what they want to do instead is they're going to have, the computers out in the field using one stack and the computers inside using the stack. What do you recommend here?
Well, I think the first thing is every CEO is going to look to save a buck. But just because somebody comes to you and says, I want to save money, that doesn't mean you have to buckle down and try and figure it out. I mean, when you think about this, you're protecting employees' ability to work. You're protecting businesses' ability to run. And all said and done, honestly, I'm going to ask everyone I can for a discount as a CEO. But really what I care about is that my business is secure and my employees are productive. Whether I'm paying $100 or $200 or $300 a month means nothing to me. What matters is that, can this guy who I'm paying 10 grand a month make calls? Can this guy do his job? And that's what really matters. So I think as an MSP, sometimes you have to grow someone. You have to just be very, very confident in what you're saying to your clients, and be very confident in your service. It's like, look, this is a bad idea for you. If you don't put threat lock on every endpoint, if you don't put BlackPoint on every endpoint, if you don't build your security and build your backup and build your business solution, your IT solution successfully, it's going to cost you. And what might be saving you $50 a month here is going to cost you $5,000, $50,000, $500,000 later on down the road. At very least, you're going to lose productivity. At very best, you're going to lose productivity. At very worst, you're going to lose your business. Don't skimp $2 on an endpoint or $5 or whatever it may be to save yourself money, because all said and done, your employees cost you more than their tools are ever going to cost you. And you need to, as an MSP, make sure you sell that. And don't hesitate when you ask your client for more money. Don't hesitate when you demand fair market value for your service. And the reality is, if you're doing a good job, a CEO is going to pay you the value of your services because he needs your services. And I'm going to ask everyone I can for a discount. I always do ask everyone I can for a discount, but not at the cost of my business. All I really care about, I struggle with it too as my IT service. All I care about is I've got 5 new employees started this month. Their laptops need to be on their desk. They need to be secure, or at their homes as it may be. They need to be secure. They need their VPN working. They need their data when they need it, and it needs to be running. So I would just say simply, the answer is it's a bad idea and we can't do that and secure you as an MSP. And if you don't believe me, then you're not using the right MSP, because if you can't trust me to tell you what's real, then find someone you can trust.
All right, so coming to you, Ryan, same question. Let's say I got CEO, he's saying, my home users, I have all these people out in the field, but now I have a couple people still at the office. Can I use a different stack for the ones at the office? Maybe I just use BlackPoint on the ones at home. What would you say to that?
Yeah, that's having a uniform stack on everything is really the best approach to that. One, your engineers are used to that stack, right? So having partial here or some things here and not there, not having a universal solution in place. When things happen, your engineers need to be familiar with those tools across everything. And when people start to talk about, hey, I'll use this example. If you're going to hire a carpenter to build you a deck for your house or build a carport or whatever you've got, and the carpenter shows up and he's looking at it and he's going to tell you a price for that. Let's say you all of a sudden say, okay, well, you're charging me, how much are you charging me for that hammer? Can you build it without that hammer? Can you build that without a saw? I want you to karate chop all the wood instead. It's not gonna, you need the tools that you need to do your job. And as an MSP, getting in the minutia and the weeds of, I need this tool for that, and I need this tool for that. And, they're not going to understand anyways that, they're there about their business. Like Danny said, they care about their business and they want their business to run and they want to be productive. And so if you take that approach with them and stay out of the weeds and say, hey, these are the tools I need to do my job for you. to build you your carport or your deck, and that's what I need. You know, I'm not going to ask you to, you know, fabricate those heat exchangers that your company builds, but you can't use that machine to do it. And just kind of put it back on them and put them in that kind of mindset so that they can think and like, oh, that makes sense. And usually if they're reasonable, they will understand that.
All right. So let's say that I go ahead and I implement ThreatLocker. Danny, how does your product, I mean, it seems like it's going to create tickets. How does it eliminate tickets and make my team more effective?
So it's not about creating or eliminating tickets, it's about net time. And ultimately, if you think about this, imagine you send out your clients new computers today. And then in 5 years' time, you put on those computers, you put their healthcare software on there, you put their data backup on there, you put Google Chrome and Microsoft Office, and you send it out to them. And in 5 years' time, they call you back and you got to replace that computer. Imagine, or you've got a problem because the hard drive's failing, but you go there and the only thing on that machine is what you put on it. And so in that respect, you're going to massively reduce your overhead on support. You're not going to get the calls, my computer's running slow, or why is your computer running slow? It's running slow because you installed a load of junk and all these Chrome extensions. So you're going to reduce your support on that level. The other thing is you're going to reduce your cyber breaches, and that's the biggest tickets. Rob might disagree with me here, but who spent less than 20 hours restoring from ransomware? And it's a big problem. I mean, so the tickets you're going to get from ThreatLocker is, I need a new app, and you're saying, okay, I'm either going to approve that app or I'm going to disapprove that app. That's a 30-second decision. That's a yes, no, do it from your phone, do it from your RMM or your PSA. It doesn't matter. You just approve it, you deny it. It takes 30 seconds. And ultimately, you're going to reduce your cyber breaches. You're going to reduce your support tickets on other areas. You're going to reduce, you went onto your client's computer and there's 15 Google Chrome extensions that keep causing pop-ups. All of that is going to go away. So you're going to get this huge positive trade-off. Yes, when you first deploy, you're going to spend a little bit of time getting everything right. But we're not talking about weeks or months here. We're talking about hours. And we're going to be there with you to help you. And it really shouldn't add tickets to your environment. It should have you, over a period of time, a net saving and ultimately help you.
All right. So Ryan, what about you? I decide to deploy your product. I get my CEO client to allow me to put it on everything. And how is it going to make me more effective? How's it going to make it so my team is having less tickets to deal with or less alerts?
So with our software that, we invented, it is, it's not just a software tool per se. So you're just buying a tool and then you're managing that, or we're alerting you. It's a software tool. Yes, we give you full access to it, but it's also a managed outsourced security service as well. So we're actually doing all the work. We're hunting those threats down. We're escalating the threats. We're responding even for you by killing processes and detaining and isolating those hosts off the network. And we're also suppressing alerts. So really, you don't get a ton of noise from me at all. And if you saw my presentation earlier, it's really about minimizing that alert fatigue and kind of taking that off your plate. So we do all the work. You don't get very many tickets at all until something bad happens. And then we send you that ticket after we've taken care of it.
All right, great. So Rob, what about you? How does Datto help me become more effective as an MSP and use my resources better?
Yeah, I think obviously something that we strive. I think we all strive for that, is to make the MSP more efficient, more profitable, all those types of things, and we do that through constant innovation of our product, right? And we're constantly tinkering with it, making it better, making it faster, coming up with new ways. And 2020 is going to be no different. The significant investment that we've made in trying to make backup. And trying to keep backup as a sexy thing is something that we're constantly striving for. One of the things that I do want to add kind of here in closing, I mentioned earlier that we hired a CISO. We've had a CISO now for about 4 years at Datto. And people would think, why do you need a CISO if you don't sell a security product, or what you guys don't think I sell a security product? And I think it's an important conversation, and one that we can maybe finish with here is the part that The reason why we have a CISO wasn't to figure out our security strategy and going out and talking to MSPs about how to sell more of us or try to get ourselves into a security stack. It was literally to help protect our own stuff. And I think there's an important conversation there that you all need to have with every single vendor that you work with, is what are they doing to help you stay more secure? What are the efforts that they're making? What are the innovations that they're having? Because we're as vulnerable as organizations as MSPs are, as end users are. So what are they doing to protect themselves, to, in essence, therefore to protect you? And I think that's a really super important conversation, one that we're very vocal about, all the efforts and strides that we make to close off all the bugs and windows and problems and issues that we've got, making sure they're all tied up. Any vendor that's doing it properly should be able to brag to you what their own security strategy is.
All right, great, Rob. Thank you so much. And remember, everybody, the goal when you're building this security stack is to increase your security posture without having a bunch of overlapping tools and leaving a huge gaping hole in another spot. I know that Ryan's going to jump up with a couple of announcements here, and we'll give it to him to go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you guys so much on the panel. Our chat was literally blowing up with, I love it. Boom. Awesome. Love these guys from Stephanie Groot. So appreciate you all very much for taking the time to help our audience here.